Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video, I like to discuss what Liz Truss's main offer to the Tory party members, whose support she is courting, will mean to those same Tory party members, and it is not what they think it is. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news in politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, politics is a funny business. You see people constantly arguing for politicians to adopt a particular line or policy as if all you have to do is persuade them and everything will be well. You know, I've observed politics in this country for decades. I developed an interest at a very young age. I've seen a lot of repeated patterns, a lot of things that keep happening time and time again. And I'll tell you one thing that never fails. People or groups wanting political leaders to agree with them on something, some policy. Now, those political leaders will either do that or they won't do that. If they don't, then those people or groups get upset. Why is that political leader being so blinkered? Can't they see that if they would just agree with me, everything would be great? Sometimes that political leader does agree with them, and those people are delighted. Those groups absolutely ecstatic. Oh, this is brilliant. Not long to go now. Wait for the next election. Then they'll get elected. Everything will be great. It'll be brilliant. This is what we've been after for so many years. Then they lose the election. Because it turns out that what these people and groups wanted is not what the voters wanted, who actually decide who wins elections. So they still don't get what they want. That is what I've observed time and time again, not just over the last few years, but over the last few decades. It makes no difference whether the political leader agrees with your policy or not. You will not get it if the voters don't. It's a consistent pattern of outcomes that formed my pragmatic view of politics. So, do you just give up? No, you don't. What you need to do is persuade the right people. It's not the politicians you need to persuade, but the people who make them politicians. Now, the problem we have in this country is first past the post makes those key people a very narrow group. If we had proportional representation, it'd be much easier because then you could rely on a wider proportion of the population. But if we take the example of Boris Johnson's fall from grace, why is Boris Johnson having to step down? The simple answer is it's because Tory MPs changed their attitude to him. But this is not true. They never have. They knew who and what he was before they ever made him leader. They haven't changed their attitude of him. It's also not because our checks and balances eventually spat out a rogue prime minister who went too far. Our checks and balances mostly failed. In fact, they are in urgent need of modernisation for our post-truth age. Now, what finished Johnson was voters changing their attitude to him. Specifically, those key target voters that are very important to the Conservatives. Once they'd changed their attitude and Tory MPs were satisfied that this attitude was not going to change back again, they acted. Some of them look at the prospect of Liz Truss or Rishi Sunak and wonder if they're boned either way. But it was the change of attitude of their target voters that prompted action. Political leaders either align themselves with those target voters or they lose. Unless, of course, the alternative is also foolish enough to be ignoring their target voters, in which case the one who loses is the one who pisses them off the most. Well, Liz Truss does not seem to be aware of this pattern of behaviour that I've been observing over many years. She has committed herself to immediate tax cuts. Not tax cuts when inflation is under control, as Sunak is insisting on. Not that it will be under control before the next election. No, Truss is saying from day one. In reality, of course, what she means is she'll appoint a chancellor who will work on a budget to make these changes, and the changes will come in like some months later. So day one might be like half a year afterwards, but there we are. She insists that these tax cuts will stimulate growth. No, they won't. Not without a lot of independent bodies tearing up their economic rules and doing things very differently. In fact, her economic plan strikes me as being very much like the Tories' Brexit plan. Like even back to Theresa May, she had a plan for Brexit. The problem was that this plan was predicated on the idea of the rest of the world completely changing the way they do things to suit us. And it's been ever thus. Truss's plans will require banks and major investors to completely change the way they do things. But she's got no plan to persuade them to do this. And this isn't just me saying this. When Truss was asked to back up her claims, she cited Sir Patrick Minford, an economist who worked with Margaret Thatcher, a pro-Brexit economist. He is supportive of Truss's economic plans to cut taxes quite quickly. However, He is also the economist who got his Brexit forecast badly wrong. He is also completely out of touch with other economists. When Minford approved of Truss's plan, other economists screamed at him, "Are you mad?" And when it's one person against the world, always bet on the world. However, Minford also said that interest rates would have to rise significantly to manage this. He reckons 7%. Truss's team deny this. The thing is now, you can't cite the approval of a professor of economics, the only one who backs your plan, by the way, and then dismiss the rest of what they say. Truss is not an economist. None of her political advisors are experts in economics either. If they have an economic plan, it has to be developed by experts. If it's going to be developed in line with the thinking of the only economist you can find to approve of it, I mean, this is unwise immediately. But if you're going to do that insane thing, you don't then get to ignore what they say will be the consequences. Not that we needed an economics professor to tell us about interest rates. It's known that interest rates are a common tool of cooling inflation. It's absolutely classic. When you've got high inflation, what you need to do is take money out of the system. You do this by raising taxes and raising interest rates. Both have been happening. The main problem with the taxation is that the burden, because we've got a Conservative government, is being dumped onto the poorest and not those most easily able to afford it. So the government haven't actually been able to use tax rises to calm inflation because the poor are already cut to the bone. But they don't want interest rates to rise too much either. Conservative Party members and Conservative voters, generally speaking, are disproportionately homeowners. This is why Conservatives don't build houses, because their core voters don't want them to. These homeowners have been used to really low interest rates and really high property prices for some time. A long time, in fact. And increasing to 7% base would be, it'd be nothing like the early 90s when major government saw a load of mortgage foreclosures. It reached, 15%. But it still hasn't been 7% since the end of John Major's government. In fact, since the global financial crash, it's actually been virtually zero. A huge rise in interest rates would hit a lot of people very hard. Net savers would benefit, yes, but people with mortgages will be hurt very badly. That's your Tory voters. It would also make it harder to even get onto the property ladder in the first place. Two groups of voters that the Conservatives rely upon would be badly hurt by this. Liz Truss is promising these tax cuts because it's what Tories like to hear. Oh, tax cuts. Yes, we should have tax cuts. It'll meet the approval of many Tory MPs and many Tory party members, even voters, but those are not important right now. But what they won't like are the consequences, because it won't achieve growth. It will fuel more inflation. To prevent inflation getting even more out of control, the banks will have to raise interest rates. No option. The result of that is even Tory voters will end up paying out more money on interest than they're saving in tax cuts, because this is the problem. People don't understand economics. They think, oh, tax cuts, that means I'll have more money. It doesn't always mean you've got more money. Because if you're shelling out on interest or services to a greater extent than the tax, like, for example, if we had more nationalised public services, would we pay higher taxes? Yeah, but we'd pay lower bills. So the overall would be a saving to us. Tax cuts are not independent of your other expenses. And part of me wonders if Sunak is prepared to have a plan B here. Of course, he wants to campaign very hard and win this leadership contest this September. But is he prepared to be patient with a backup plan? If he loses, is he setting himself up as the I told you so candidate for later? Because Truss is promising the following: tax cuts when inflation is high, but also strong growth, and that interest rates will not rise by that much, and that inflation will come down. You will not find any serious economist that says this is possible. Even the less serious Minford does not go along with this entire package of economically contradictory promises. So she will fail. In some regard, she has to fail. Either she will not instigate the tax cuts after all, in which case she's going to piss off those Tory party members and voters, or she will not be able to deliver the promised outcomes for this policy, because the reverse will happen. And no matter what she does, it will turn ordinary Tory members and voters against her. The question will be, will the Conservatives just accept losing the next election and concentrate on an accelerated programme of asset stripping the country before 2025 in like a huge political trolley dash? Or will they do the unthinkable as Boris Johnson is reported to think? Will they get rid of her and have a third Prime Minister inside a single parliament when it all goes to shit in a year's time? Interesting, if terrifying times. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.